You're listening to Two Mics and a Guest, a podcast of people's stories and the career pathway that led them to where they are. And now your hosts, Michael Holliday and Mike Young. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Two Mics and a Guest. As always, I am Michael Holliday. Joined with me is Mr. Mike Young.
How's it going?
I am doing excellent. We are one day closer to a state title championship game.
I know you're kind of excited about it. I don't know that I've heard much about it around here.
I know we actually leave at 1 o'clock today to go practice up at Swanee so we can practice on some turf. And I know our boys are excited about that.
Well, the whole community is excited about it.
We are.
And I'm excited about our episode today. I'm pumped. We have Kristin and Scott Van Velsor here. They are jacks of all trades in some things. Both of them journalism majors in college. They work with a cool organization we're going to talk a lot about, Do More Art Events. They have done an event here in our cafe at TVA, and it's a fabulous mural that we've done. Folick was the artist, and we've interviewed him on the podcast. We need to get Moby on the podcast, too. Those two guys are currently working with you guys, installing a mural today, right? Downtown Tullahoma. And also with Odin Media, and I want to hear more about what you guys do. There's a lot of different things that Odin Media does. So thank y'all for spending some time with us.
Yeah, thanks. You guys have an awesome setup here. I wish this had been around when I was in high school. We're kind of building the plane while we're flying it. I've said that on the podcast a few times, but it's exciting where this can go. Yep. So we're excited about it. I'm hoping to get us a student podcast of some kind at some point and get that plugged in. That would be rad.
So anyway. Well, I know, Kristin, you grew up here in Tullahoma. Scott, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the Bay Area, California.
I saw that, you'd been at San Francisco State, right? Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't sure about that. And I'm assuming, I read the bios, there's a whole bunch here. Kristin has been a journalist, has worked, I'm going to just read it. I'm not going to pretend like I know it. We've got researcher at Newsweek, Warner Media, Gannett, Condé Nast, articles, national articles, and those kind of things. Veteran of the U.S. Navy, see that, served overseas. Also journalist and Bachelor of Arts at San Francisco State. I'm assuming you guys met at Hog School Utrecht in the Netherlands.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That was a pretty good pronunciation of it too.
One of my best friends is used to live here in town, but they live in Holland, in the Netherlands now, and I love going to Amsterdam. And I love going to that place. So I was kind of excited that you guys had spent some time there, lived there for a while, and I'm assuming that's where y'all met.
Yeah, we were doing a study abroad program. It was a 1-year program, half in Holland and half in Denmark, and we were classmates. And I'd gone over there thinking that I wanted to live in Europe full time because I'd just graduated from the University of Tennessee. So for me, it was kind of a gateway to maybe my next move in life. And on day 2, I met Scott. And we had never planned to date or fall in love with an American. And here we are 16 and a half years later, married, and we own a couple different businesses together and a nonprofit. And we are back living in Tullahoma.
And you had to go to the Netherlands to meet.
I know.
I mean, my goodness.
It's crazy.
We started out, just friends. And the school there was fairly easy for us coming from the States. So we ended up traveling quite a bit together. And that's when you realize that you actually like each other. When you can travel on a train or a bus.
True.
You can share a living space at some point. You're like, okay, I think you can get...
What better place to get to know somebody, though, is train travel. I love. You can actually talk to people. And then, my goodness, the cafe. I love going to Europe. It's all good. My son is hoping to study abroad this coming summer if those programs work up. And I just think we're going to have to go see him and go travel is what we're going to try to do.
I think you should. And I think anyone listening to this podcast who is a student should highly consider studying abroad, no matter how you have to do that. I know it's not cheap, but there are a lot of scholarships, financial aid packages. But for me, I studied abroad in Edinburgh in undergrad, and then I did the 1-year program where I met Scott, and then I later worked for a study abroad organization called Semester at Sea. And I think that no matter what career path you're going down, study abroad is just so important to getting outside of your box in your hometown learning what the world is really like. So I'm such a big cheerleader for studying abroad anywhere. I mean, it could be Spain, the UK, I don't know, the Caribbean, but just get out of your country if you can.
A couple of gigs ago, I traveled a good bit, and my daughter has studied abroad. She was in Ireland and then got to travel through Europe. My youngest is hoping to be in France. He's in a film program at LSU right now, but he's hoping they get to do some independent study over there and do some stuff with that. I totally agree with you. Anytime I've traveled, I realize we love to think of ourselves as the big, most powerful country in the world, and I also think we're the most sheltered country in the world. And the interaction of cultures over there is just huge, right? I mean, it opens up literally the world. I know we're traveling, but it does, right?
For sure. Scott was able to live abroad through his service in the U.S. Navy, which maybe you want to talk a little bit about your time in Sicily.
You said in Sicily, right?
Yeah. I actually got to live over in Europe for 3 years the first time. And what drove me to this study abroad program where I met Kristin was the desire to go live overseas again. For me, it didn't really matter the program. I just charged it all. I knew that it would be valuable for me as a person and as a writer and, I don't know, just as a humanitarian, just understanding the world as much as possibly can. The only way you can do that is if you live there.
Right.
You can travel, for a week or two and get a snapshot, but actually boots on the ground, going to the grocery store, doing the day-to-day things are really what I think opens your eyes to what we have here in the United States and how special it is,
right.
But also how different cultures do things and an appreciation for that, which every time I've come back to the States, it's like, yes, lights that, I can speed and like there's all kinds of benefits. And there's like 18 different kinds of mayonnaise in the grocery store, which is not the case over in Europe. There's one. But also whenever I'm traveling, I also appreciate all of the things like the little cafes or the ability to get, fresh food
right
everywhere.
It is life-changing in a lot of ways. And again, my comment about being sheltered is not meant as a critique necessarily. It's just because, gosh, we're blessed to be here, obviously. But opening up the world that way is a huge thing. We spent some time, I have been in Copenhagen as well, but as a kid, we were staying in an apartment for a while, and getting that local experience, walking to the market was great. It was funny watching my mom go to the market there and trying to buy milk like she would in the States, right? I mean, she was buying several of these little cartons of milk every day because she was not going to go to the store every day like a lot of folks would do in Copenhagen anyway. It was funny. And obviously, we might have been wearing big American flags draped all over us because it's pretty obvious.
They can tell, can't they? Yeah.
They can tell. No matter how much you try to blend in, you still have American written all over you, which isn't a bad thing. And it also means people are more willing to help when you look like a deer in the headlights. Like, I don't know what any of this means. I don't know what I'm shopping for.
Now, both of you journalism majors. I mean, what gave you that bug? What was your inspirations to head that direction?
Well, funny enough, I was always a math student. I mean, I loved writing from the time I was little, but I went through the Tullahoma City school system, which has a really great math program. Yes. So I went all the way up through AP Calculus 2. Mm-hmm. I was on the mathlete team. I was a state champion in calculus.
Wow, there you go.
I hold that in very high regard.
As
now,
you should.
Like back in high school, I was like, oh, no, I'm not on that math team. But now I'm like, it's pretty cool to be able to say you were smart once, know? And I went to Sewanee on a scholarship and an academic scholarship, and I also played sports up there. Wow. And they really kind of pushed me into the math program because I already had so many credits. And even at a liberal arts school like Sewanee, I started in the junior level like computer science courses. But the second I got into physics, into some more linear tracks where I like numbers and there were no longer numbers, and I was like, oh, I don't like this. So I wound up transferring to the University of Tennessee. I'd always said I wanted to be a journalist from the time I was like 10 or 11, and everyone tried to pushed me the math direction. So I went to UT and they were like, oh, great, a journalist good with numbers. You will be a financial reporter and we will mold you. And I was like, that really sounds kind of boring. Right. But I took every class possible at UT. I was an editor at their daily paper. And then my favorite job, I was a marketing assistant for the Lady Vols.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
So that was kind of my foray into, I always thought I might want to be a sports reporter. So I worked in Lady Vols marketing my whole senior year. So all the basketball games, soccer games, and volleyball games, I got to work. And then when I wasn't working, I was covering them for the newspaper I was editor. So that was
That's got to be fun.
It was a lot.
You pretty much
fun.
just lived in Thompson-Boling Arena, didn't you?
Yes, that was where my office was, and it was during the Pat Summitt reign. So I was in the office with her, and she was intimidating, and I never said hi to her so much, but I was just constantly in awe.
One of the most historic tiers of basketball ever was that Pat Summitt Lady Vols era. It's
so
still this day.
good.
Of guys and girls, like it's still regarded as the most prestigious.
Look, Pat Summitt was intimidating watching her on TV, so I don't know about this.
Oh, she walks in the room and it's like everything goes still. Yeah. And luckily, I was in school in the early 2000s, so this was before she did get ill and then had to retire early. Right. But it was just really cool being in her presence. And my boss at the time, Jimmy Delaney, is over Vols football now, so he's still there. So I was really lucky to have an awesome team who kind of taught me. I didn't know anything about marketing, but we were doing marketing and promotion. So all of the cool things in between, like timeouts and the games, the t-shirt shooters. I got to run the music through Thompson-Boling Arena. So there was a lot of really fun things. And then during the week, we were just like running numbers and promotions in the office. But that, I think now, 20 years later, marketing is a big part of my job. And I had no idea back then. I was just like, well, I'm just going to go work at a magazine, which is what I did. I worked in magazines for a long time and I still do. But I think that was really crucial to learn something different that would maybe help me out later in life, because you just never know in the media. As you guys know, running a podcast, it changes every week. And so having all the skills possible, like interning wherever anyone will have you, getting a job was like really important for me.
How about you, Scott?
I kind of shimmied into college sideways. I started at 26 years old. I thought I was going to be an engineer. I wanted to build things, do big things like bridges and highways and things like that. And then I worked a couple of summers as an intern, a paid intern with the state, and I realized it was the most boring job on earth. It was to sit around and watch people work all day. And I like working with my hands, and so I switched to journalism. I also had issues with the physics classes and OChem and stuff like that, so I realized a liberal arts degree would be easier, more fun. So I ended up having probably all of my elective credits be in chemistry and calculus and things like that. And I graduated with, I think, 178 units. But all
you should have got a master's out of that too, or something. I mean, that's almost enough.
I kind of probably could have done that, but my time in the service allowed me to spend 8 years in college, 4 years in community college, and then 4 years at San Francisco State, one of those years, which was traveling overseas. And so journalism was, I've always been a writer and kind of a storyteller. Back home when I was in Europe, I would write long form letters back home to my entire family. And it's something that has always interested me, is learning more about people and just reading and writing. Excuse me.
Well, I know I didn't mention Kristen's little blog, the Camels and Chocolate. It's a good blog. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff there. Do you have blog posted or anything? I'm not putting you on the spot. You're a writer as well.
Yeah. I mean, Kristen's the powerhouse of the family, but I often have written blog posts, and I'm like her top editor. And so sometimes I'll come in and add a little burnish of flowery words and things like that, just to kind of take it down another rabbit hole. But yeah, we call it co-writing. Kristen's, I would say, 85% of the writing.
But anytime there's anything like technical, or we're talking about history or science, and I'm like deer in the headlights, and I'm like, Scott, you have to take this part. So he does a lot of the writing.
Their blog is great. I mean, I recommend it. We'll put a link on the post, but Camels and Chocolate and lots of stuff there. Lots of stuff about travel that you guys have done. I mean, when did y'all get the travel bug? I mean, you served overseas. I mean, that'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my mom, who also is a Tullahoma High School graduate, they moved here when she was 6, and she had us traveling all growing up. So anytime there was a summer break or spring break, she'd put us in the car and we'd do a big road trip. Mm-hmm. So I had the good fortune of seeing a lot of the U.S. By the time I was a teenager. I think my sister, Carrie Luna, even beat me to all 50 states. I think she hit all 50 states at like 19 or 20.
Oh, wow.
It took me until I was about 28, maybe. Mm-hmm. But that was because when the school system added fall breaks, I was already out, and Mom and Carrie would go on like 2-week trips to like Minnesota and Iowa, like places that you wouldn't think of as like vacation destinations,
Right. Yeah.
but the goal was just to see as much of the country as possible. So my mom kind of raised us like that, and I went overseas for the first time when I was 15. Mom took us to England for Thanksgiving. And from there, I just traveled a lot in the U.S. But then when I studied abroad, I think I was 20 years old through Swanee at the University of Edinburgh. That's when I really started traveling to other countries. Because once you move abroad, you realize that going from Scotland to England is like less time than going from Tullahoma to Knoxville.
Exactly.
And you can hop a train, and the flights are really cheap. So I saw a lot of Europe. I mean, there's very little of Europe I haven't seen at this point. There's some far eastern parts that I haven't been to yet, but most of the European countries in Western and Central I've been to multiple times. And so that was where I really got into traveling. But I didn't know it was a career path, because no one ever told me, hey, you can be a journalist and people will pay you to go travel places. But when Scott and I were living abroad in 2005, I had worked at Newsweek that summer, and I'd done my best networking, and I met the editor who edited the column called The Good Life for the international editions, and it was new restaurant and hotel openings all around the world. So anytime we'd go to a new city, I'd find one and I'd pitch it to her, and she'd let me write about it. And the funny thing is, I didn't even think to invoice her for years, because I was just so grateful to be able to have published clips every week in Newsweek that I never invoiced for what she owed me. So I was basically like an unpaid intern, even though I should have been paid for that. But I had so many clips in Newsweek and other national publications by the time I was 23 or 24. And I got my first book deal around that time for Frommer's, which no longer exists in print form, because it was bought by Google and then sold again a couple times.
But it was a travel Bible.
It was.
It was.
Yeah, and I did about 15 books for them while, toward the end of the time they were alive. And that was really cool as well. So I'm a published author. But magazines and have always kind of been my bread and butter. But the last couple of years, we've backed off a little bit because we've been doing so many other things. You mentioned our company, Ode Media, which is doing tourism marketing mostly for rural regions like ours. So we've devoted a lot more time to that. I still freelance quite a bit, but not 20 stories a week like I used to, maybe like 3, because we're traveling so much around Tennessee and photographing and doing video assets and consulting with the different city governments and their chambers and their tourism arms. And that's kind of been our focus. I'd say we started our company, Odin Media, in 2012, right when we moved back to Coffee County. But the last 5 years, that's really become kind of like, 75% of our time goes to that.
Tell us about Odin Media. What do you guys do?
So we went through a program here in Tennessee, or in Tullahoma actually, called, it was through SimTech, which is at Dan Markham's facility, and it was to kind of sculpt the next generation of entrepreneurs. And so we went through about a year-long program, and we had great tutors and Dan and Cameron Newton and some other people here in town. And we started our company. At the time, we were focusing on local marketing, and then it became more regional, because even almost 10 years ago, people in town here just weren't thinking where they needed to be thinking marketing wise.
Yep.
Like a lot of them still don't have websites.
Right.
So we kind of broadened our scope to be more like Southern based. And so we have a lot of clients like the Tourism Board in Huntsville or Franklin, Tennessee, or Savannah, Georgia. So we work on several projects a year for a lot of these different entities that encapsulate words, photos, social media promotion, video. Tennessee Whiskey Trail is one of our favorite clients. We work with them. Right now we're doing a photography project, but we just did a video project. It was training for all of the distillery employees across the state. So we just do a lot of different things that are really fun and don't feel like work most of the time.
No, that sounds very exciting. I mean, because it sounds like it's different every day. One of our standard questions we always ask, what's a day in the life like? And you probably can't answer that question.
Definitely cannot answer that. There's a little writing, a lot of photography, some editing, maybe some painting walls because we have the nonprofit as well. So
it's very, very cool. Tell us when you're, like, again, that's one of those things. You talked about doing the entrepreneurial program and those kind of things. You obviously incorporated your interest in art and travel and photography. All of that is incorporated into what your business now, right? I mean, you've been able to add these things that you're enjoying, and you're able to make a living at it. When did that click? When were you able to kind of think that we could do this?
I think it really started clicking when I went full-time back home with Kristin. And that was an accident. Kristin's dad had a stroke, and I worked for him at the time. And it didn't make sense for me to be working there anymore without him at the helm.
Right.
And we had already talked about, probably for the year prior, that we needed to be doing this full-time because there was a lot of work we were leaving on the table, and also interesting pathways of work that we were not exploring because it was just Kristin. And I think that's when things really started to click, is when you have a partner who's doing the exact same things and thinking about, how to grow the business and pursue other avenues. That was, for me, that was the inflection point. I don't know what you think. But.
Yeah, Dad's stroke was almost 6 years ago, and it was one of those blessings in disguise because I don't know if we would have had the courage for Scott to leave a secure paycheck and benefits and that kind of thing. I mean, it's one thing to have one of you in a couple be self-employed, and there's never been a time where I needed to lean on the fact that I had someone with a salary in my house. Right. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, but there's still always that, what if this is the year? Right. What if the pandemic means all our work disappears? So after Dad's stroke 6 years ago, Scott stuck around for the next few months and then ultimately just decided it was kind of the opening we needed for him to come work with me. And, I'd say, if anything, our biggest weakness is we don't have enough hours in the day. There's so many other things we want to do, but it's just the two of us. We have some subcontractors who work with us, but ultimately, we have a lot more we could do, just not enough hours. And we're trying to get to a more comfortable balance where we're not working all the time, because that's the hardest thing when you run your own business is you're like, if you're awake, you could be working on something that affects your bottom line, or, do it, tackling your...
the blurred lines between family time and business time can get kind of shifty. And
exactly. And, we don't have kids, but my sister has a niece and nephew that are basically like our kids, and we see them every day or every other day. So there's that as well. And that's actually been something that's been good for me, because I try to end work around 5 most days and go see them and have happy hour with my sister. We moved to Tullahoma from Manchester about 3 years ago, right after my niece Charlotte was born. And there was no coincidence in that timing. My sister had a baby and I'm like, we need to be closer. So we're about a mile from them. And so that has been a really good kind of separator for us to end work and actually take the evenings to, watch a movie or, have dinner together or hang out with my family. But before that, it was really hard. Anytime I was awake, I was like, must be writing. Yes.
I can imagine.
There's so much you've talked about that I want to maybe try to ask about. It was interesting to me. You talked about this precipitating event. I mean, a stroke is a big deal within a family for that person, and being able to take that event and see a possibility in it is that's a skill, frankly. I mean, of being able to open yourself up to do that. Being able to look at the opportunity doesn't minimize the severity of the event, obviously, but you can go a lot of different ways when something like that happens. And so I think it's interesting that you guys saw that as an opportunity to try something new.
Yeah, we call it, pivoting is
pivot's the word.
Might as well write it on the wall of our house,
right?
Because it's that we constantly pivoting. If you think about, we work in travel marketing, and what the last 2 years have looked like.
I can't imagine
travel. It completely has altered the approach that we take and the approach that every human being takes to traveling. So we've had to pivot in that way, and prior to that, it was pivoting from, local businesses don't really have funds, so we're going to broaden it out to governmental entities or state entities, and also we there's a lot of writing that we don't publish that we do that has to do with home improvement. We've really
Right.
started to.
I've been watching some of those.
Like just yesterday, we were writing about attics, attic insulation,
Yep.
and
restoring historic windows and how to redo your kitchen. And
I have gone down that YouTube rabbit hole a few times. I'll be watching something and then the suggested video is, look at this old home, Victorian home remodel. I'm like, okay. Like, I have no interest in that because I don't plan on doing that. But I'm like, all right, I'll watch this.
The internet, I complain about it sometimes, but it can be so awesome. And I remember I just wanted to change out the foggy headlights on my Honda Pilot. And there's a video for that. I mean, you could get on YouTube and find it. And home improvement. My son-in-law's dryer went out, and it wasn't the heating element that would be right on the back. It was the one you got to take the whole thing apart. There's a video for that, and he was able to do it. And it's kind of cool that y'all are providing that kind of content as well, right?
Yeah, we have a few clients in that space. So we've worked with This Old House for the last couple of years.
wow.
And most recently, we're working with Angie, which was formerly Angie's List. And so it's funny because they tapped us for our knowledge in home improvement, SEO, and writing. So all of those skill sets combined to make us kind of a powerful team for someone like them. And they've been a great client this year when they rebranded. So a lot of the work people don't see because we don't put it on the blog. Everyone thinks that our lives are just doing fun murals and traveling to fun places. But I'd say the reality now is, we're working more on this 2,000 word guide on how to pour epoxy in your house. And it has to be, it's not like we just pull words out of our mind. It's a lot of research and talking to experts and fact checking and referencing things. But I think that's the thing is like, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to be okay doing the not sexy stuff as well. And so, we've always done, if the paycheck is good and the client treats us well, like we'll consider it. There's nothing too boring. Like I think we can kind of make anything fun. And I think that's key for anyone who wants to go into a communications related career is you have to be willing to open yourself up to where the work is. Like you can't just say, I'm going to go and be a sports reporter and then you're going to be on ESPN tomorrow. Nope. You're going to have to do a lot of grunt work and probably some jobs you don't want. Yep. Yeah.
I mean, to that point, that whole industry has changed so much. I mean, and now it's changing minute by minute almost. Traditional magazines have suffered in some ways, but for many, it's opened up brand new opportunities, obviously. And then writing, I remember when nobody had a blog, and then everybody had a blog, and the content has just exploded. People do that, and it's a way for students it's a way to work. It's a way to do things, right? I mean, that's the thing. We think it just appears on the internet. Right. Actually, we have people that's kind of providing this stuff,
grinding it out.
Yeah. I started the blog in 2007, so it's
early.
Yeah, it's in its 15th year now. I was working at Condé Nast at a fashion magazine, and it was the first time I'd been at a monthly magazine. So I'd been at daily newspapers and then weekly magazines, and then I was at a monthly, and it's so slow when you're used to the daily grind. Yeah. And this was before every magazine had a website, so I'm sure it's different now. But, we weren't pumping out content to post every half hour. So, there would be 2 weeks of the month where it was really busy and 2 weeks where it was slow. So out of boredom, and because I can't just sit there and be paid to do nothing, I was like, I'm going to start my blog. And so I just started a blog one day, and I started writing about just living in New York and then my travels at the time, which, funny enough, my first trip then for the blog was Iceland, where Scott and I just got back. So 14 years later, I returned. And, then I moved to California and went freelance, and I started spending more time on the blog. And then within a year, we'd gotten an award at South by Southwest for best travel blog. And then 3 years in a row, we got it. And then we started getting advertiser inquiries. And honestly, we're an ad-free blog. Any monetizing we do is sponsored content, but that'll be like a tourism board hires us to come to New Orleans and write about the experience there. So it's not really, it's more organic. Yeah. And so
it's a tough gig, but somebody's got to do it.
Exactly. But we've been very mindful about being ad-free because we want the user experience to kind of supersede everything else. And so, however, if someone did want to start a blog and devote time to it, they could make that their full-time job. Like if we wanted to devote more hours to the blog, like one of us could make a full-time living on that. It's just right now, like we're so passionate about promoting rural tourism in Tennessee, that the blog has kind of taken a back seat to that, but we still do post a couple times a month, like new content. But anyone who's interested in writing should absolutely start a blog. I know there's been these cycles of blogs are dead now with TikTok and Instagram Reels and everything, but I mean, we still see the same traffic that we saw a decade ago. So I think if you devote time to it and you have a solid product, like, and you're promoting it, I mean, people have to be able to find it. So you have to be sharing it with friends, sharing it on Facebook. Of course, any teens listening are like, we don't use Facebook, but
That's okay.
But just having the ritual of writing a declarative sentence over and over and over again and describing the world is valuable in so many different ways throughout your life, no matter what job you're doing, even if you don't do any writing at all and you're just talking to people. I think understanding that.
I think every writer I've talked to, they say writers write.
Yep.
And the avenues to do that. And the other thing that writers do is the thing that a blog gives you is some control to put it out there in the world, get the response back from it, and do it. I have notebooks filled with words that nobody has ever seen. But it's something about pressing the publish button on a blog or on something and starting that interaction. Some of that happens on social media in small and longer posts and stuff. But I think it's still necessary. I mean, I don't think that's going away because of TikTok, quite frankly.
I think this next generation, too, they're so used to consuming and producing everything in short form that for anyone who really does want to be a writer, they do need to think about something like a blog, if nothing else, just for practice. I mean,
it is a muscle to be exercised.
It's just exactly what you're saying. You have so many things that have never seen the light of day. I have hundreds of blog posts in draft mode that have never been published, probably never will be. But like when I have thoughts, I just sit down. I mean, it's my journal. I just open up a new post on my blog and I write it. It maybe is never published, but it's still that practice. I mean, I've been a journalist for 20 years and it's still practice to write regularly. I mean, yes, I write 10,000 words in a day more easily than most, but I mean, there's some days when I'm like, I can't even put together a sentence. But if you're not in that routine of practicing, you're never going to get any better. And so I think, having a blog is a free avenue anyone can do who has access to a computer. So if you do want to be a writer or journalist, it's like the best place to start.
And I've got some songwriting friends in Nashville that they feel the same ways. I've got to get this out of my head on the paper or type it on a computer to get these ideas out of my head, and then we'll see where that goes from there. And a lot of songs don't get published or don't get deals or don't get demoed because they're just in the notes section of your computer or in a journal. And but every so often you're like, okay, I think this one's going to get traction. I want response from this. I want feedback. So let's put this to the publishing company. Let's get it out. So I think I see some similarities in those two fields as well. I
mean, look at Taylor Swift. She just put out an album of things she wrote 10 years ago, and it's number one.
That she finally got control back from.
Exactly. So it's, I mean, even the most famous people have, backlogs of songs and lyrics and blog posts that no one ever sees, but you never know. I mean, 10 years from now, you could have the opportunity and have that already in draft mode, something that you can bring back.
I think that's something to encourage. I received a book yesterday that I ordered from the publisher, author signed. He started as a blog. He did other things, but he wrote regularly and is now published 3 or 4 books. And the practice of it and everything else, and frankly, some of the content from his books were directly from the blog and the practice of it. And the thing I want to encourage our students too, and we can point to the big Taylor Swifts of the world and those kind of things. I love a marketing writer that I like is Seth Godin. And a lot of things he talks about is just ship, right? Throw it out there in the world, even if you're throwing it out there free. If it's got traction, if it's good, people are going to respond to it. And it wasn't a thing to discourage anyone. It was like, put it out there. Let's see what it's about, because you're going to find it. And you don't have to find the Taylor Swift audience, I guess is where I was going with this. You find your tribe.
Somebody will relate to it.
Crew, right? And I think that's a important thing for students. Everybody starts from somewhere. Nobody just automatically becomes Taylor Swift or a published author. They start from somewhere. And I want to encourage people listening, put it out there. There's avenues to do it now that we used to not have, right? So
yeah, I mean, there's people I follow online that their specialty is a certain type of insect, and it's that's what they are all about. It's this this funny little insect, and they have a huge. They've made a career out of it, basically, and that to me, I love that about. I guess being an American too is, or maybe just going to college or exploring alternative career paths. It's like that is something that didn't really exist when I was a kid. You kind of had to go into a career. At least that was the way, and that's when things started to change. But now you can just take the most esoteric idea, and you as even somebody who's rebooting their career, which I may do again in the next 5 years, you can just start over and dive deep and become that voice, because there's so many ways that you can communicate, like the radio, video.
Art,
lot of mediums out there.
Yeah, public art was not on our 10-year list. Like, hey, let's start a public art nonprofit. It's just something that happened because we noticed buildings that needed paint. Scott had worked as a painting contractor, and we lived on the square in Manchester, and we're very invested. We were actually one of those people fixing up a historic Victorian. Yeah. To your earlier comment, and that was just something that we just kind of followed, just like a small seed of an idea. I mean, really, it was Scott. We both loved murals, and we were already seeking them out everywhere we traveled, but neither one of us had any idea what it looked like to actually put together a mural program. And one day, we tried to work with the city of Manchester at the time, and just, everyone's kind of a volunteer board or commission, so it's really hard to get people's attention when they've got a million other things going on. And Scott's like, we should just do this on our own. And I was like, how are we going to do this on our own? And he started knocking doors and met a building owner in Manchester, Jim Wheeler, who owns Wheeler Construction. And he said, hey, Jim, I'm Scott. I'd really love to do a mural on your building, and I'd also paint it for free if you let us do a mural. And so Jim said, well, Scott, I'd have to be a fool to turn that down. And then we found a muralist in Nashville who we loved, and we got her to come down, and we just kind of took it one step at a time and figured out the process and figured out the fundraising. We asked her how much it would take to make it happen. And then we went to one of the banks, which was formerly First National Bank in Square in Manchester. We held a few events where sponsorship monies all went to the mural, and then we needed to close the gap. We went to Brett Parsley, and he said, okay, we can make this happen. And the first mural went up, but then we weren't like, hey, we're going to.
Was that the American flag magnolia flower? Yeah.
Yeah, that was by Tara Aversa, who recently completed a Walls for Women piece for us in Columbia, but then she also did Bertha the Octopus for us here in Tullahoma. I guess you guys can kind of see it from your building. But it was, again, just kind of pivoting, seeing, I mean, it just really flowed nicely with what we were doing in rural tourism, and not just promoting destinations, but also trying to make them more attractive to tourists and working with the local officials to do so. And so many small towns have great bones, but the buildings have fallen into disrepair, or, they've sat empty for years. And so that was kind of the approach for that, was like, well, we want these areas to attract more tourists. And the way you're not going to do that is have broken windows and rusted walls. And so it just was like one mural at a time. We started doing that. I think we were counting, and the one that starts today in partnership with Ascend is around the 35th large one that we
I was looking at the map on the website, and there's some wonderful pieces on there. I love following it. I was thinking, I was telling Folick when he was here, I was sitting at Fido Cafe in Nashville one day, sitting over on that right wall as you sit in by the glass, and I was looking at the mural on the building next door with the lips and stuff. I don't know if y'all have seen that one or not. I was there an hour and a half or so doing some writing, some work, and I bet there was 50 people that would drop by and interact with that piece. And the public art thing is, we take it for granted. Maybe we don't even know it exists or what it does. It's more than just beautifying a building. The interaction I saw there was just fabulous. It was really cool.
Well, we all kind of know, if you're from this area, you know about the famous Wings in Nashville, and it's such a photography destination that everyone has to go stop by the gulch and get their photo by the wings. When the piece that Folek did across from the high school on the loading dock was made, I was still teaching at THS, and I remember students just talking about, oh, we're going to get a photo in front of that. We're going to go put it on Instagram or Visco or whatever it might be. It's such a cool interactive thing that it's not just you drive by and this building looks so much better now because it's got color and it's brightened up this area. It's so interactive too.
Well, and I love that piece because the teens relate to it so much.
Yep.
And it's not, I mean, that by far, I think, is the most photographed piece in Tullahoma.
I agree.
And it's crazy because you don't even notice it's there a lot of times. But every time I go past, I see teens there taking senior photos or doing selfies or doing shoots of their friends. And I just think that is just such a cool byproduct of this program. And to your comment about the wings, that has been a huge curse for us because every time a city reaches out to us, any city anywhere, they're like, oh, can you come do a mural here? We'd like it to be wings. And we're like, that the wings have been done and, you know, they serve their purpose, but
they only see that. They don't realize that other things could be interactive too.
Exactly.
Really. Yeah.
Well, and it's like art by its nature is interactive. Like every piece we've done is interactive. And so when they're like, we want something interactive, I'm like, that's what public art is.
Yes.
And so there's a constant education process. And no matter how many times we feel like the person understands, we're like, we have to go back to, we're like, this is going to be cool. I promise. It's not going to be, they're always afraid it's going to be something offensive. And I don't know why that is because I can't think of any murals that are offensive. Like no artist wants to go and put anything but their best work on an wall.
That's right. That's right. And from you, from the nonprofit, let me do something that's going to kill my business. No, that's not what we're going to do. Right? Now, to that point, I want to talk a little bit about what DMA Events does and what that process looks like. You've done an event here with us that we're very excited about it, and the mural's just part of that. Talk about what's in store. We haven't finished. We're going to have some other events going on with this with students, and they're going to get a chance to do some hands-on stuff as well, I understand.
Yeah. Well, we're doing another career panel with the artists. It's similar to this talk. Really, I think this is a good little practice for us. And then we haven't really worked out the details.
There's no details. I do what I understand on it. The career panel is great for me. Again, it's students seeing people actually doing these things, and then being able to watch. We had a couple of students come in and watch Folek installing this one. I think they're going to be able to go and watch some of it work again, and so I'm just excited about that. What is a DMA event? What does that look like front to back? What is it? What do y'all do?
Everything. Every single project is completely different and comes with different challenges.
Right.
Like the one at the Virtual Academy was great because it was interior. It was the first interior project we've done, so we didn't have to plan around weather, which obviously that is one huge thing that can throw off a project, right? Especially in the South. It's like it can rain for 40 days and then you can have a drought. Like you just have no idea. Like October's usually like the prime time for muralists to paint because it's usually dry and warm and you've got still longer days. But this October, it just rained the whole time. So several of our projects got kind of pushed back and kind of moved around. But so the way our nonprofit works is that there's a couple different ways that we work in terms of someone like Greg could come to us and say, hey, we have this great cafe and we want to do an art project in it. What does that look like? Let's discuss. And then we can go that direction. Or we've gotten several grants in the past from the state. Tennessee Arts Commission has been wonderful. And we'll have an idea and we'll apply for a grant for them. And then so we'll already have the funding and we'll go to a community or a building owner and say, hey, we're really interested in doing a piece of art on your building. Here's why, here's how it'll benefit you. And then the building owner becomes the host of that piece and then kind of like part of our DMA family. And then other times it'll just be a city that just kind of foots the whole bill. And that's how our Walls for Women program mostly worked, where we were honoring 100 years of women's suffrage by hiring only female artists all of last year to paint across the state. We started this female art trail called Walls for Women. And we just finished our 10th piece. So it was meant to just be in the centennial year, but it was so popular that we had other cities who wanted to join. So this year we added Sweetwater, Viola, Columbia, and we're about to add Lawrenceburg. And so the way that typically works is that the city, like there's kind of like a set feed that covers all of the art, and we do everything. We're like a turnkey public art organization, we say. So we do all of the prep for the wall, anything that needs to be done. We book the equipment, we get the materials, we hire the artists, we go through the contract process. So we take it from like an idea to like full execution of the finished piece.
I'm glad you brought up the art for women. I said it wrong now.
Walls for women.
Walls
That's
for
okay.
women. I knew I wasn't saying it right. But I went through the website and looked at some of the pieces that y'all have done so far, and I love the philosophy behind it. I loved everything that y'all were doing with that. So that was a cool idea, I think.
Yeah, it's fun. And having Moby and Folic here is funny because we've only worked with females for the last like 18 months. And I'm like, oh, it's nice that I love the Walls for Women program, but we have so many talented male artists we love. So I'm like, I'm glad that we're able to bring Folic in for the virtual academy, and then he's assisting Moby for the bookshelf project that we are doing with the Literacy Council, and that one is sponsored by Ascend Federal Credit Union and the Arts Commission.
And where is that location roughly in town?
So do you know where the large landscape of the heart, it's a huge abstract piece on Lincoln and Atlantic in downtown Tullahoma? It's on the back of an office park that a gentleman named John Parker owns. So that overlooks a parking lot that the city now owns, and the bookshelf moved into that building. They were in the mall, but they got removed when the mall renovation happened. So they moved into that building, and it just is invisible. No one knows it's there. So Scott and I gave it a solid coat of paint back over Labor Day. We painted their whole building, and then the wall next to it is owned by Sharon and Norman Blair, who have Memories Antiques downtown.
Yes, yep.
And they have been amazing. We did not know them prior to a couple years ago. We did Wisteria Maiden, which is the big Japanese woman on one of their walls.
It's kind of in that alleyway area.
Correct.
Yeah, yep.
So the bookshelf mural is on the opposite side of the wall, and it's facing the railroad, so it'll be even more visible.
That'll be cool.
And then we have a little graffiti abatement and remediation alley through there. We're just kind of calling it DMA alley for now, but there's a lot of kind of tagging that had gone on that wasn't actual art on private property. And so what we've done there is, because there's no way, we tried to remove it with just like products and nothing was coming off. Like there's not really any way to remove it. So you paint over it instead, right? So Scott came up with the idea to hire local artists to paint over any of the graffiti that's been done down there. And so now we've kind of got like a little museum path going on there. We have a local artist named Jenna Lee. She used to work at the high school, and she's done a few pieces. And then we have another artist named Nikki. She did a big cow. And then our niece Morgan Oswald did kind of a woman in water. And so all of those pieces were put in to cover up tagging, which is a cool way to kind of turn it from, and we want to do kind of an open wall downtown at some point, if we can find the right space or partner where we can have, like we were talking about, getting some of the high school students involved, where we can let people practice, and so long as they're following the guidelines and not doing anything obscene, but like a rotating wall where they can just work on
that'd be awesome.
Public art.
I know the kids are excited about doing that art in public for it to be seen.
Yes.
Last year, Miss McCullough and I reached out. We had always talked about, there was just the big empty grass area in front of where you were to walk into the basketball gym. And so we were like, what if we could just get a massive rock and we could just place it right there, and then we could paint on it, kind of like Tennessee has the rock that they paint on. And so we did some research. We talked to Mr. Quick at the time, and he was all for it. And he's like, if y'all can find the sources for the rock and get it delivered here, I'm all for it. And so we reached out to the Rogers Group and Alan Rogers and them, and they had a rock quarry, and we sourced this 40-something ton or 20. It was ridiculous. And so the kids in the art program at the high school are painting, getting ready for this event. So they're painting a cat on it, or they're doing whatever. And I can see the excitement in their eyes when they're like, oh, my work's going to be displayed for all of my student peers to see when they walk into school from the main parking lot every day. And so I think that's a really great idea to get these students involved in that.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like social media in a way, right? Like they want that instant gratification. Right. And I think that is why you get some kind of senseless tagging of buildings is because, you know, they want to like kind of leave their mark.
They want to express, but they need to do it in the right channels. Yeah.
And so we want to encourage that done correctly. So if anyone listening has a wall they'd let us turn into like a rotating outdoor gallery, we would be all about
That'd
that.
be awesome.
Because we have so much paint. Honestly, like we have a full 3-car garage and most of it is paint now. So like we have supplies that we could use. We just need a wall. That's always the problem is we just need more walls.
Well, local business owners, if you're listening, please reach out.
Talk about public art a little bit. I know we've been doing it, but y'all had a philosophy on your website that I thought was good, that you believe in the power of public art to transform minds. It's not just paint on a surface. Again, we talked about interacting with it. Just riff a little bit on that, on what it does for our community and stuff. Yes, it beautifies it. Yes, we get to see these things, but it's deeper than that.
I remember when Nashville first got that piece with the flag and the flower. I remember people in Tullahoma talking about, hey, have you seen this, the one in Manchester? Yeah. And it created a buzz.
Yeah. I mean, I get deep into it with public art because for me, it affects my mental health when the buildings are not in good repair. Mm-hmm. And it's something that you forget that you're even noticing or not noticing anymore once you've been in a place. And adding a piece of art to a building that used to be forgotten, like the one in front of the high school there. Mm-hmm. Everybody forgot that building was even there. Nobody, but for us doing public art, I was like, oh, that's a perfect wall. It's 45 degrees to the street, and it's big.
I didn't know that building existed until the piece was installed from myself.
Yeah, and surprisingly, that's been the case of almost all of the pieces that we've done. It's just like it activates the space, and for us, one of the more powerful things that our artist told us one time was that the art can alter the environment, and I, as a painter, just as a house painter, I've always loved altering the environment. You know, whether you can paint the wall black and it transforms the room, or you could paint a building pink and it totally transforms it.
It's such a mood booster.
Yeah, and it is funny. You know, it's intuitive once you say it out loud. You're like, obviously, yes, we need to be painting things, but it's not everybody's go-to, and so. All of the other people that live in the community are impacted by whether a building, even if just has fresh paint or if the windows are broken out. So for us, holistically, the art obviously has the potential to anchor a community and put it on a map and give something pretty for people to look at. But it also, longer term, I think it just improves the mental health of the community to have pieces of art that you can look at. I mean, we're pretty rural out here.
Yeah.
You know, there's not museums that you can go or big public sculptures and things. And I think the human mind needs to have these types of things exposed to it, through the eyes.
I tell you, I've looked at your map. I want to get my motorcycle and go make a little tour around Middle Tennessee and just hit the murals and stuff.
All right, Mike.
And it would be
that's our plan.
We got to do it.
We're gonna take the podcast on the road.
We can do that.
Do a selfie from each station.
That's totally got to happen.
That'd be good.
Totally
and I love too the aspect that a lot of people in Coffee County never leave Coffee County, especially if you're a kid, you have working parents, you can't drive, or, so it's kind of a unifier across ages and race and socioeconomic class, that kind of thing, because public art's free to consume. You don't have to pay to
go to a
museum, get a cup of coffee, which, for some of us, we might not think anything of paying $15 to get into the Frist, but for family of 5 or for a single mom who is working a minimum wage job, that's just not a reality.
Yep.
And so I love that it's free to consume and it impacts everyone. And I was speaking at Hickerson at the school a couple weeks ago, and I had all of the 4th and 5th graders, and they don't have art in their elementary school. They don't get it until they're in middle school. And so I didn't know that going in there. And I put together a slideshow of the murals, and I thought, these are 4th and 5th graders, they're not going to care, because I had an art activity. But what they loved was the mural slideshow. Every single one of them, they're like, I've been to that one, I've seen that, I've taken my photo. They wanted to tell me all about how they've been there. Exactly. They wanted to tell me all about how the one at the high school, like Digital Madonna, they're like, I see that every day when my mom drops my, brother off at high school. And so that was just really cool, as to that kind of justification that the kids are paying attention.
Absolutely.
And it's impacting them. They get excited when there's a new piece up. I mean, I grew up in Tullahoma, and I remember thinking, oh, it's so boring here. Like, I played all the sports, but what do you do when you're not playing sports? And so now it's like we're giving people something to do, and it's free, and it's outdoors, and it gets them out in the community, and hopefully visiting the bookshelf and buying some books to support the Literacy Council, or visiting Memories Antiques. Like, so it's also driving business. It
draws you to that business, yeah.
Yeah, which we want to do, because we want more businesses in Tullahoma. We want it to continue growing. So it's just like more than just like painting a wall. There's just so many other benefits people don't think about.
It's that old cliche, right? Does a fish know it's wet when it's swimming? And you alluded to that really with what you were talking about with the philosophy of this. It does affect us. And I think that's part of the creativity that we take for granted sometimes with artists. We'll hear a great song, we'll see something, and somebody saw that and created it. And we take it for granted, but that creativity is something that adds to our lives, all of us. And it changes the water we're swimming in a little bit too, is right. So what, man, we've talked about a lot of stuff. Sitting here now, what would you tell your younger self back in the day? Y'all come through this really diverse story of travel and all of these things. What would you, both of you, I want y'all to respond to this. What would you tell your younger self now?
Chill out. I'm still telling my older self that. I thought I had to be in every club, every AP class, and I'm glad I did all of that. But do I think that being in every single thing my entire life affected where my career went? Not necessarily. Do I think having a lot of different interests and skill sets helped? Absolutely. But I do think there's so much pressure when you're in high school to make sure you go to the right college, go in the right major.
It's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming for a 17 or 18-year-old. And for me, I mean, I went to Sewanee for 2 years, and then I transferred and I changed majors, and it all still worked out, but I had all this pressure, because everyone in my family is a CPA, to be in a career that was stable. And so when you go into a career in any kind of creative field, people are like, yeah, good luck with that. And so I think if I just, trusted myself a little bit more, I don't have any regrets from anything I've done. I mean, and I also started my career pretty early, and I love what I do, but I think that not putting so much stock into where you go to college. Like, I did not apply to University of Tennessee the first time around. Also, there was not the Hope Scholarship when I was around. So that was the difference. And I only applied to private schools. And then when I transferred, I went to UT, and I loved it. And I was like, I should have been here all 4 years. It had so many different things to offer. I loved Knoxville. It's one of my favorite cities. So I think that, like, for me, it would have just been like, you don't have to go to the most expensive private school. UT is a great school. We have great schools here in our public university system. And so anyone looking to go to MTSU or UTC, or even starting at Motlow and then transferring to four-year college, I think like that's a great plan. I don't think you need to blow your life savings to go to a fancy private school.
And go visit these schools.
Yes.
Like go get your feet on campus and go ask questions to these people or other students, and they're going to tell you.
I think that's totally, I know my kids going through that process. They would apply to 2 or 3 all public schools, and when they got their feet on the ground, it was amazing how they were like, I think this is where I want to do, or this is not what I want. And being there present like that was a big deal.
Scott,
how about you?
What do you got,
Tell
Scott?
Young Scott.
Wear more sunscreen.
Go to class.
I needed to tell that to mine.
Yeah, I needed to tell myself to go to class too.
I was kind of a jerky late teenager, and I wish I hadn't been. My parents, both working class parents, really kind of struggled to give opportunity for me and my sister, and I sort of abused that in high school. I barely passed. I shouldn't have passed, and I wish that something like the virtual academy had existed back then, because I probably would have gotten a little more out of high school. But that said, the delay for me from high school to college was really helpful to focus on. I was a better student because I started college late, and I had that opportunity to realize that these are really great teachers at the community college. And, half of the kids, it's just like straight from high school to another desk. And if you don't really appreciate it in that way, then you're not going to get as much value out of it. So I know it freaks parents out, but I tell every parent that has a teen to let their kid take a gap year, at least 1 year. They're like, shh, stop talking.
You're also trying to figure out who you are as a human at that age too.
Yeah, and so that's definitely more sunscreen.
Scott worked in the trades from the time he was like 18 to when he went in the Navy, and that's so helpful for us today. He knows everything when it comes to home restoration or whatever it is, and people are like, how does he know so much? And I said, well, he did, like, from the time he was 18 through his 20s and then on through college, he worked in different trades. And I think that we don't emphasize that enough because it's all you have to go and get your bachelor's and then your master's and then do this and that. But it's like right now with the big construction boom, we're telling any, teen or 20 something we know, we're like, yes, go to school, get a business degree, but like start working at construction firms now. Start your own, learning those skills. I think those are never going to go away.
Or go work at a hardware store. I talked about this the other day on an episode, is go work at a hardware store with building supplies.
Yes.
Because if you're selling the product, you're going to learn a little bit about it too. And it's going to help you one day when you buying a house and restoring it.
I appreciate what you said, Scott, because we've multiple times covered it here. I flunked out of college my third semester, and I rushed back into it, but didn't really change the plan. And I ended up in a major that I used it, but I don't know that it fed me and really who I was, right? I was trying to live out that story in that kind of way. And we are trying to figure out who we are. I mean, that's my gosh, that's what growing up and that's what living is, right? We're figuring it out every day. But as a kid, we don't have that perspective. We put everything as an emergency. It's got to happen. And quite frankly, our first 12 years of schooling is so laid out for us. When it's opened up for us at the end of it, we don't know what to do with that sometimes.
You're told this is what you're going to do, and then eventually you're like, all right, now you choose. And you're like, wait, what?
Yep.
Walk across that football field and get our piece of paper, and we're like,
now it's on you.
Oh, crap, what are we doing now, right? So anyway. Anything else y'all want to share with us? This has been great.
Yeah,
it's been.
I think we've talked about every topic there is.
Yeah, I definitely would encourage people that maybe can't afford college to look at the trades. Those are
that's a good word.
Very honorable positions, and I can't tell every single contractor that I know right now is dying for people. They keep trying to hire me. They're just like. They're literally walking around. Can I pay you however much money you want?
Yep.
And those types of things will be like a second pillar that you could fall back on at any time in your life if you do go to college and end up getting a degree and working behind a desk or teaching in a profession.
No, that is a good word too. My son is got a history major. He was going to teach and get a coach and do that kind of thing. And didn't really want to do that. He worked for a cabinet maker in Knoxville for a while, and now he's working for a home builder there. But that's saying exactly what you're talking about. One, there's opportunity, a lot of jobs in that, and he's loving it. I mean, he kind of wishes he would have gone to TCAT and done something in the trades.
The trade industry is needing people so bad.
Oh, it's like we had Andy Rigney build our kitchen cabinets, and
he's got a great shop.
He's amazing. When we moved back almost 10 years ago, he was still in high school and he was teaching me guitar. And now he's building our cabinets, and he just saw a need when he was living in Arkansas and started this company. And, I don't think like that isn't what he saw for himself. And he's now, you've got to book with him like 6 or 12 months out to get on his calendar. So I think he's a great example. You might want to have him on the show.
No, actually. I was thinking that as you're saying that, he would be a great guest on it, because that's exactly what he did. And it's doing great work too.
Yeah. We love our kitchen. Highly recommend.
Highly recommend. Is there any websites you want to plug before we get out of here?
So our blog is camelsandchocolate.com. And then for anyone interested in the public art, you can just search DMA events or go to dma-events.com. And that stands for Do More Art. And we do other events type thing. Mostly we do murals, but we kind of do, if anyone has a good idea, we will entertain it always.
For sure.
And Odin Media?
Odin Media is just kind of like our non-public facing like company that encapsulates all of it.
There's a website there.
But yeah, we have a website for everything.
It's a one pager. And I would definitely recommend the newsletter for the
nonprofit.
For the nonprofit,
I have signed up.
It's sweet. It's not spam. It's once a month.
Yep. Just updates all of our projects, kind of tells the story. The next one actually will be about Toloma Virtual Academy, and then also the Moby and Folick piece on the bookshelf. So
I'm wanting to drop by and watch them a little bit and just say hey.
Tomorrow's
And
the day.
we'll put links on our
For sure.
post this as well.
Scott and Kristin, thank you so much for being here. We enjoyed this.
yeah, us too.
All right, everybody. That's been this episode of Two Mics and a Guest. We hope you enjoyed. We'll see you guys next time.